It's Thursday, 11 o'clock. It's time for this week's Watch Drop. Rather than a theme this week, I want to do a sort of this or that comparison on a couple of different watches that we've got at different ranges, different sort of genres that just happen to be in the drop this week. I'm going to start off with one of my favorite references, which is the Patek 5170. We're lucky enough to have a couple of different variations on the 5170. And only a couple of weeks ago, we had the Platinum, which sold in a flash. But we've got one other alternative to that watch, a different variety that I think works really well and is really seldom seen. The first one I want to talk about is the rose gold variety with a black dial. What I love about the 5170 is that although it's a singular reference, there are different generations of that watch, and the dial has sort of evolved over time. I think the later generations came with Breguet applied indices, but there's not just one generation of that, there's two, one with a pulsation style and one without. So I think it comes down to how much detail and information you like on the dial, whether simplicity is really your thing or a sort of complex, sort of technical looking dial. This one, the rose gold with a black dial, is the Breguet numerals but without a pulsation style, and it works really, really well. When this is paired with something that's a little bit lighter, it brings that black and gold contrast really to life. I really, really like this watch. Breguet applied numerals are a big win for me, but also you have that incredible in-house Patek manual wind caliber, which is super thin, super well finished, and it just works. It's fantastic. I really, really love it. I have to compare this watch, though, to the pulsation style that we have in white gold with a white dial, also with applied Breguets. And you'll see the difference with this watch is that the Breguet indices are smaller and they're brought slightly closer towards the center of the dial to enable you to have that sort of technical outer ring showing the pulsations. I think if I was a doctor and that sort of pulsations-ometer is useful, then I think it'd be absolutely the watch to go for. But for me, I think the simplicity of the non-pulsation style just wins out on the 5170. But I'm going to talk about another reference, not from Patek, where the pulsation style I think really does work. I'm contradicting myself, but I kind of get what I'm saying in my own brain. I love both of these watches. They are super svelte, they are beautifully finished, and they make for an absolutely wonderful dress watch with a little bit of a sporty touch to it. And it's so nice to have the two of these side by side. I'm sure they'll both fly off the shelf, but for me, of these two, the rose gold with the black dial, that's a winning combination. One of the comparisons that I really like to make when people come into Subdial and they want to look at either a 5170 from Patek or an 1815 chronograph from Lange, I like to compare the two of those watches because on paper they're very, very similar. The case size is around 40 millimeters on both of them. They're both manual wind calibers. They're both a sort of technical dial layout, as I mentioned before. And this third generation 1815 chronograph from Lange, I think is probably the best of all of the different generations of 1815 chronographs. And again, there are 3 generations so far. This one does have a pulsation style. And I like that the black and white has that added detail. It really feels tool-esque, which I think works well on most chronographs. But this feels more tool-esque and less dressy than perhaps the Pateks are. And I think if I were to choose between the two different models, the two different brands, if I wanted a dressy watch, I think the winning one is the Patek. But if I wanted something that is slightly more utilitarian, slightly more tool, then I actually think the 1815 chronograph is the one to go for. The finishing on the movement, as we know and we've talked about before, is just second to none. That caliber is like a little city that you can really zoom into with a macro lens or a loop and enjoy every last detail, which is so perfectly finished. That's a great watch. It's not as slim, and it does feel chunkier and heavier than the Pateks, and some people might enjoy that. But as I say, if it's a dress watch you're going for, I think the 5170 wins. It's nice to have these two as a comparison, or three if you include the white dial. But I guess it's horses for courses. Depends what you're wearing it for. But you can't go too far wrong with any of them. The next this or that comparison that I want to make is two dual register non-chronograph precious metal watches. A little bit of a mouthful there, but these two are really worth talking about. The Lange 1815 Uptown in yellow gold is actually a really rare beast. I think they made by production numbers many more in rose gold and in white gold than in yellow gold. I know from speaking to someone on the inside that the production numbers on these are super low. I think it's less than 100. So it's rare to see these, although we've actually seen a couple over the years. I think the combination of the contrast between the blued, very big blued Dauphine hands and the yellow gold case works perfectly. We've talked about that in the past. And the technicality of the dial, the Arabic numerals, and that sort of classic Lange brushed mid-case, manual wind caliber, all of the components of this watch work so well. It's very, very typically Germanic and classically Lange. But it's nice to compare this watch with something almost equivalent by Vacheron Constantin. This is the Harmony, and it's a watch that actually I've never held in my hand before. It's a very, very interesting case design, a sort of tonneau shape with a circular central window through to the dial below. It uses spade hands, which is something that I'm a big fan of. It actually works really, really well. I love the way that they're finished, and super well finished, in fact. But rather than the complication being a power reserve and a small seconds, on this one, it's being used as a sort of dual time complication, so you can actually pull the crown out one position and flick them hour hands by hour increments, which is actually a really nice watch if you're traveling for business. What I really like about this watch is it's an automatic, so really great for daily wear, but it is chunky, it's thick, it's kind of, I don't know, it's like a paperweight. A really odd thing. And it's quirky. It's asymmetric, which I like. Ironically, the Lange on the table in comparison is much more symmetrical. Lange is pretty known for asymmetry in their watch designs with the Lange 1, but this Harmony I really love for the asymmetry. It's a very cool thing. Both of those watches are really interesting to me, but I'm really interested to know of the two which you guys prefer. It's a close one. It really is. Both great watches. Another comparison that I'm going to move on to is slightly more tenuous, I have to say. This is an Audemars Piguet Code 1159. It's a watch that I do like talking about because it's a, I guess, very divisive Audemars Piguet release that came out in 2019 initially and has evolved over the last 6 years or so. Nowadays, it's a much more refined watch. I think it's resonating more with audiences. As they've evolved the watch, and taking this example from last year, 2024 model, they've gone back to stick indexes, which doesn't upset anyone. And they've combined that with this very, very fumade dial, silver to black, sort of two very contrasting colours that you sort of bring you into the centre of the watch. It's kind of mesmerising to look at it, and particularly in the sunlight. I do like this watch, and I like that it's paired with this sailcloth type strap because it just feels like an everyday, robust, outdoorsy watch, which is a nice alternative to that heavily polished and finished Lange Royal Oak, and we have lots of those. I like that the dial with the black component and the silver component actually is flowed through to the case construction, which is a combination of ceramic in the middle and steel on the outside. That's a really nice detail that not many watches have and think about. The sort of the aesthetic of the side of the watch is often overlooked. I also really like the skeletonization of it. Very technical looking watch. And as I say, these designs from the Code 1159 range are really evolving and starting to resonate with a much wider audience than those that initially jumped at the line. I want to compare it though to the Chopard Alpine Eagle. This is a limited production in a green dial, and it was brought out a couple of years ago now. The green on it isn't that sort of bright, vibrant, Rolex Hulk-esque green. It's dark and subdued, but you have that guilloche that reminds you of the eagle's eye. It's a weird, mesmerizing, swirly, I don't know really how to describe it, but it's very, very cool. It's very cool. And what's nice is to compare it to another guilloche pattern in a watch that's very similarly priced, I think, particularly on the pre-owned market. These two are pretty close now. And there are different patterns to them. There's different, I guess, use cases in that a bracelet isn't for everyone, but it's great in hot weather. Side by side, these two are quite interesting and both quite compelling, but I really would love to know your thoughts on whether the Chopard Alpine Eagle is one that you'd go for. I know that the lack of bracelet taper is something that annoys people, but actually for me, it reminds me of the St. Moritz on which it was originally based. And again, the Audemars Piguet, now that it's evolved and refined, I actually quite like it. I really do. These two watches are quite interesting together, but which one would you pick? The last comparison I'm going to make is on two value propositions. And weirdly, I'm kind of more excited and interested in these two watches than most of the other watches on the table. Don't ask me why, but these two watches work brilliantly in my mind. First off, this is the Oris ProPilot limited edition for Coulson. And I don't really know what Coulson is or who they are, but I'm really glad they did this because it's a very brave design aesthetic. You've got this sort of flame-coloured orangey red on a black case with bright, vibrant white hands. So legibility is key, and obviously as a pilot watch, that's what you want. I don't know of another watch that has this sort of fiery orange, sort of lava-esque dial to it. I was really interested when this one came in because it's just one that I really like. Probably talks more about me than the actual design of the watch itself. The case is in carbon and the bezel and the case back are in titanium with a sapphire window into the movement. And I think Oris has done brilliantly well with this watch. I know the ProPilot line is one where they've really gone to town with the R&D of this watch. I think the power reserve on it's off the charts. It's much bigger than most watches, particularly at this price point. But I'm glad that they've had fun with the dial. Because a lot of people would have chosen a black on black or a white on black or something boring, but this is really cool and a real standout watch. The watch that I want to compare it to is one that again is a collaboration, this one with the guitar manufacturer Fender, and this is with Bulgari and their Aluminium range. I'm someone that owns one of these in the tennis edition that they did, and I really like this watch. I think people are put off by the fact that it's a kind of combination of a rubber and metal large linked bracelet that is not interchangeable, but actually is really comfortable. As they've evolved this watch over the years, they've now started putting on a Velcro strap here. And for me, that's the winning combination because it enables as much micro adjustment as you could want. If you're wearing this watch in the summer, and I think most people will be, this, as your wrist sort of expands and you start to feel a little bit uncomfortable with a tight watch, you can easily just tweak it by a millimeter or two. It's a light watch. It's kind of robust. It's swimming pool safe. And this example is a GMT as well. So really, really cool. I don't quite understand the collaboration with a guitar manufacturer, but I'm here for it. Frankly, I like brown, I like the aluminium, I like the contrast of those two, and I think this watch is a winning combination. So of those two, the Oris and the Bulgari, which would you go for? So that's this week's drop. Over 70 watches hitting the site and a real eclectic mix, I think, of some quite obscure watches, but ones that definitely resonate with me. There are a couple here that I didn't even get to talk about. This really interesting full yellow gold Omega reduced Speedmaster. I've never seen that combination. Really, really cool. And it reminds me that yellow gold and Omega is a really cool combination. I also really like this Genta inspired Constellation in two-tone. Very, very 70s aesthetic, and both of those I would love to take home. Do hit the website, check everything out, and I'll see you next week.